you for joining us. I want to thank you for joining us this evening for what will be a most interesting presentation by the Engineers Registration Board team. Just some housekeeping that we usually would have at the beginning of our webinars. This is a CPD that is a continuous professional development event and carries a value of 2 CPD points. So we ask you who are members of our association, or maybe you're a member of another professional body and you want to claim these CPD points, please contact our secretariat to have your CPD information forwarded to you, should you wish to claim those points. We will introduce our presenter shortly. She will present for between 30 and 40 minutes, and then we'll have an open session to you, the general audience, where you would be asked to interact and to ask your questions and to drill down to find out as much information as you can this evening. The purpose of this session this evening is not only aimed at students, but certainly at engineers in practice who are perhaps not registered and are about to embark on that process and want to get information on how and what is required of you. So we really hope that you make the most of this evening session and answer those questions and queries that you might have had. We also ask that when you engage, that you please mute your electronic device. You will be muted throughout the period of the presentation this evening unless you're called upon to ask your question. You alternatively, if you're feeling a bit shy and you don't want to ask that question in person, you can type it in the chat and I can convey the information to our presenter this evening. We do have some upcoming events which I just want to make you aware of at this stage, and then I will repeat them at the close of this afternoon's event. So coming up on the 28th of October, which is this Saturday, we are having a tour, and that tour is at the Lears. That tour is going to be at the Lears agricultural retention pond, which has been built for the purpose of harvesting rainwater for irrigation. That is going to be led by engineering fellow Andrew Hutchinson, who was involved in the design of the pond and the project. So he will be giving us a brief and some information. So we ask that you turn out to avail yourself of the opportunity. This is also a CPD event, and we will be starting at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. Parking will be opposite the pond in the C.O. Williams yard. So we ask that you please not block up the road. C.O. Williams have graciously extended their car park to us. So when you go in, just park in the designated car spots, and then you safely cross over the road toward the pond, where we will start the presentation at 9 a.m. We also have our student interaction, which had to be canceled this past Saturday because of the inclement weather. That is going to be coming up on the 4th of November, and that is being held at the Barbados Public Workers Cooperative Credit Union Training Room in Belmont. That is going to run from between 3 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. Anyone here who are students, persons who are considering going to university, persons who may have relatives or young members who are looking to get into engineering and want to know what engineering is all about, we'll ask you to come out on that occasion and to get some information by the persons who will be presenting on that afternoon. Also, we will have some information from the Barbados Public Workers Cooperative Credit Union, where we have somebody speaking about how you can possibly apply for academic loan, loan to help you with your studies. And there will be some information on the credit union's thrift club, which is the junior arm of the credit union for those of you who may be interested. So this is an information sharing session for both students and parents alike. So we'd ask that you take advantage of that opportunity for those for whom that may be relevant. Also, we are asking for some of our members, particularly persons from a spread of engineering professions, If you can come out on that afternoon, it would be wonderful because you get the opportunity to interact with some of the parents and the students afterwards. Persons may want to come up and ask some questions one-on-one, and we'd like that opportunity to have our members engage in this give back to the general public. Coming up then in November for our November webinar, we will have on the 14th of November, the webinar will be titled Business Opportunities for Professionals in the Built Environment in Panama and Latin America. Our speaker on that occasion will be His Excellency Ian Walcott, who is Barbados's ambassador to Panama and Latin America. So we'd ask that you avail yourself of that webinar for those of you in practice. And for young engineers who are probably will be out of university in short order, this will be perhaps a very interesting webinar where Ambassador Walcott could perhaps share some information of opportunities that are on the horizon and what is required for doing business within Panama and Latin America. We have the Barbados Association of Professional Engineers has its AGM, which will be coming up on the 23rd of November. And that is going to be held via the Zoom platform at 7 p.m. And that's the 23rd of November. You will have information coming out to you as members. That will be coming out to you via the regular platforms, whether it's email. You'll probably see a flyer coming in your WhatsApp or Instagram and whatever platforms you're on. So as members, we ask that you look out for that, save that date, because that's as an association, as a important meeting that we need to have every year. And we would ask you, please, as a member, to come out and to find out what your association has been doing for the last year through the reports, but also to be a part and of the process of election of officers, etc. And then on the 2nd of December, we will be having our annual Christmas Awards dinner. I should just say our annual dinner, which happens to fall around Christmas time. That is going to be on the 2nd of November, and that's being held at the Wyndham Grand Resort, Sam Lord's Castle, which is in St. Philip. Pricing and information on tickets and the information pertaining to if your company is interested in purchasing a table, that will be out shortly. If you would like to partner with us as an association, as a sponsor, we ask that you do reach out to Stacy in the office or reach out to Joan. And they certainly are the ones working on this in terms of the planning, and they will be able to give you some further information on the levels of sponsorship that you could assist the association with and the benefits that you that can be redeemed to you for that assistance. So quite a bit coming up in terms of an association. We hope that you as our members, at whatever level you're at, would seek to engage and to come out and to make the most of these events that are coming up. So without further ado, we want to get into the business of this evening, where we have invited our friends from the Engineers Registration Board to walk us through the process of becoming a registered engineer. The presenter this evening is Engineer Felicia Cox. Felicia, I ask that you turn on your camera at this stage. Fantastic. Good evening, Felicia.
Good evening.
Hi, Felicia. So I'm going to toss the ball over to you that you can take it away. Remember, guys, at the end of Felicia's presentation, we will have a question and answer segment. So please do make some copious notes and engage Felicia. There are also other members of the ERB here. So, you know, it's a real team event this evening, and the whole point is to really give you as much information as you need so that you can become registered. So, Felicia, without further ado, I turn it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Vincent. Good evening, all. Having been introduced, I'm just going to jump right into things. This presentation is not limited to those individuals who are looking themselves to be registered. We also want to reach out to persons who are supervisors, persons who are mentoring, engineers in training, and so on. But we're very thankful that BAPE has allowed us this forum to educate the members on this topic. So here's an outline of what I'm hoping to be able to cover this evening. A little bit about the board itself, and about the act, to try to answer a couple of questions. If, questions you might ask yourself, am I qualified to be registered? And how do I apply for registration? And to go through some, in brief, some documents that are available to you, specifically the guide to registration and the new application form. So we've revamped the application form to kind of provide support to and align with the guide to registration. And we also want to speak to interviews as a part of the process, and to walk you through what happens once you've actually been, once your application has been approved by the board. Immediately after that, we kind of want to touch on something that we view as a very necessary change to the process at the board level, which is the incorporation of continuing professional development into the re-registration process. And then we'll end simply with some questions. So about the board. The board is a statutory body. It's established under Chapter 368B of the laws of Barbados. And the role is the regulation of the field of engineering. It comprises a representative of the Ministry of Transport and Works, or whatever is the Works Ministry at the time, a representative of the Minister directly, and 4 registered engineers nominated by the Executive Committee of BAPE. So that means that BAPE is always represented on the board. All current members are registered engineers. It's required to meet at least quarterly, and one of the focuses of the board is actually to review and process the applications for registration, but it's also responsible for regularizing cases of improper registration and implementing disciplinary action. Where disciplinary action is required, there's a committee that's supposed to be established as per the engineers registration regulations, which are associated with the act. And it comprises members of BAPE as well as members of the ERB. Of course, we hope that disciplinary action will never be a regular concern of the board. So that's not something that I'm going to focus on today. I'd rather focus on registration. So the first thing is, am I qualified to be registered? That's probably the first question that you may be asking yourself. So what actually are those qualifications for registration? Well, these are prescribed specifically under Section 5 of the Act. And that says, subject to Section 6, which is the following section, of course, a person is entitled to be registered as an engineer under the Act if on application to the board, he satisfies the board that he is qualified to be registered and is a fit and proper person. So really and truly, you have to meet whatever the requirements set out by the board at the time that you're trying to be registered. For the purposes of subsection 1, which is the section above, a person is qualified to be registered if he has, in the first instance, a degree from an engineering from University of the West Indies, or a degree, diploma, or other qualification in engineering granted by a school or university that, in the opinion of the board, is evidence of satisfactory training in engineering. Okay? So what does, in the opinion of the board, actually mean? The board considers a program satisfactory if at the time during which the candidate completed the program, it was accredited by an organization representing a signatory to the Washington Accord. What does that mean? There is an international agreement for cross-recognition of engineering degrees, and that agreement is called the Washington Accord. Signatories include Canada, the United States, Japan, the United Kingdom, China, Korea, New Zealand, Australia. There are many signatories, over 20 signatories to the Washington Accord. But the idea is to allow engineers to move across jurisdictions, at least with respect to their degrees. It's the responsibility of future applicants to ensure that their program of study complies with the requirements. So if you're not familiar with this, I would urge you to look up the International Engineering Alliance's website at ieagreements.org because there's lots of information about the different bodies that represent the signatories. So the accreditation bodies represent the signatories on this accord. If for some reason you've not been able to determine what accreditation the program or university have, and you really should make sure going through the university or school of engineering that you know and understand what that accreditation is, you may have to take some advanced action on your own to make sure that you are still able to use that degree carefully, very carefully. Research the institution, the degree, and the accreditation status, both of the university and the degree itself. Understand that you can have a university that is accredited, but the specific degree may not be. And it might be a good idea to consult the board and the accreditation council before making an application to an institution where you're unsure. It is preferable that you stick to universities which already have accreditation in compliance with, the Washington Accord. But also understand that both institutions and programs can lose or gain accreditation. So the accreditation should be current for the time that you're actually going to be doing this particular course of study. That's really important. Oh, apologies. I went a little too fast there. But you also have to have 4 years of such experience in engineering as the board approves. Now, how do you apply for registration? Your application begins with the completion of the board's approved form and submission to the office. You'll need a single hard copy mailed or delivered to the office, and also submit an electronic copy. The electronic copy can be delivered by email, but there's documentation that needs to be certified. Things like you need to have official identification, identity card, passport, or what have you. And also you would have to have copies of your degree, copies of your other certificates, and so on. If it is that your degrees, whatever documents you're submitting are not certified by a justice of the peace, a notary public, or some others qualified official, the originals must be actually submitted. The originals have to be submitted for certification at the office. So Stacy, who's the administrative assistant, will certify those documents for you. So she'll double check and make sure the copies match the originals. But especially if you're based outside of Barbados, it's best that you take advantage of a notary public or other official that can certify them for you. Over the years, the board recognized that some guidance on the specific requirements for registration was needed. And so that resulted in the development of the Guide to Registration to Practice Engineering in Barbados as an Engineer. That's the full title. The cover page is as you see it here. It's been live since November 2021. And this document goes into some detail about the process. And you can get that in PDF format, either from the ERB or BAPE. It's really a really important resource. It doesn't matter if you're an applicant, if you are proposing someone for registration, or you are a supervisor or have some other role, because the expected roles and competencies are spelled out there. Employers, supervisors, referees, mentors, and trainee engineers are all empowered to align the trainees' experiences and documentation to the board's expectations. So it's a very good idea if you actually make sure that you have this document. How do you get it? If you are on the website for BAPE, it's directly on the main page. So there's a button marked professional registration requirements. So it's really easy to find and to download. Now let's take a look at the roles and competencies I briefly mentioned earlier. So the first two, and probably just two of the most important roles, are the trainee engineer and the supervisor. And because these are going to be the people that are most heavily involved in documenting experience. Those 4 years of experience are what we're referring to now. We've gone past the degree stage, and now we're making sure that we demonstrate competencies. And this is just a few key items taken from the guide. This is not a substitute for reading the guide for yourself. I really advise that you go through the guide on your own and take a very close look. But the trainee engineer should meet the academic and good character requirements listed in the Act and be in a period of on-the-job training. So it's essential that having graduated, you find a job in engineering to be able to accumulate these experience items. You have to understand and comply with the registration guidelines. So that's why I pointed you initially directly to the guidelines. You also need to be documenting your experience in a format that complies with the guidelines, and we'll speak about that a little bit later. But it is also best if you're doing that on an ongoing basis to make sure that you have all the information documented as you go along. But most importantly, you need to take responsibility for the development of your career. If you find that you're not getting the breadth of experiences that you think you need to be looking for more experiences, talking to your supervisor, talking to mentors, and so on, to try to make sure that you get those experiences. Take charge of different tasks where possible, including those that might be outside of your comfort zone. Some people in engineering and science don't necessarily like writing or might not like presenting. But for example, these are both key communication methods that are really important across different fields, but especially in engineering. The supervisor, on the other hand, provides opportunities for the trainee to actually demonstrate and document, to accumulate the relevant experience. So this is another key role because the supervisor can constrain the trainee's opportunities. We'd rather that supervisors fully facilitate the trainee in whatever it is that they're looking to do. So that means it's really essential that the supervisor either works in the same or a similar area to the trainee's academic profile, and that the work itself provides opportunities for development instead of just routine work that offers little to no challenge. The supervisor is also supposed to certify the trainee's documents. So you need either that person be registered or that there's a strong relationship between the two as a team and a registered engineer that will allow the engineer to actually take responsibility for the trainee's work. Preferably, that engineer, of course, would be within the same organization, but it's really, really critical that a registered engineer be able to sign in some role validating the person's experience. Anyone certifying experience should know the trainee's work ethic and capabilities and actually be comfortable and confident in the trainee's character and competence. That's really important. Okay. So remember, non-engineering supervisors should ensure that a registered engineer is assigned to take responsibility for that engineering work. The other two roles, main roles that are part of the process potentially, are the referee and the mentor. So what are referees and mentors. A referee is preferably one of the trainees' direct supervisors at some point in their career and should be able to comment on the applicant's experience over at least a 12-month period. So this is someone who knows the applicant pretty well. And that person actually is one of the signatories on the very first page of the application, saying that they are vouching for the individual, okay? This person should have at least 10 years experience and also be currently registered in Barbados. Where they are not Barbadian, where this is an applicant perhaps from overseas, they should be currently registered in the jurisdiction that they hold registration in. But remember, their role is also to help to verify the applicant's engineering experience. So that's why it's important that that person has had contact with the individual. They know this individual and their experience. This role is different and distinct from a mentor, where a mentor really is there to help provide guidance to the engineer, perhaps to suggest programs of study or courses that can help to complement the person's current skill set, that can help the applicant to achieve the objectives and goals that the applicant has set. Now, the trainee should not be foisting their responsibility onto the mentor. The mentor is not there to tell you what to do. You need to be self-critical. You need to understand where gaps might be in your portfolio or in your experience, and you yourself should be thinking about, well, what can I do to fill these gaps? Okay, so the mentor could be one of the referees, but whether they're a referee or not, this should be a person that the trainee can seek out for additional assistance. Regardless of the role, everyone that's involved should be aware of the core competencies that are embedded in the guide to registration. These are viewed as competencies that all engineers should have. Application of engineering knowledge, methods and techniques, use of engineering tools, equipment or technology, public safety and interest, engineering management, communication skills, teamwork, continuous professional development. So these 7 core competencies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go through very briefly what each of these core competencies, the broad strokes of each of them. And this is directly from the guide. So if you've seen the guide before, this should come as no surprise. Under competency 1, expect to describe engineering challenges you faced and the solutions you crafted. So how did you define the problem? How did you analyze? Did you analyze data? Did you do technical and economic feasibility analyses? In general, what you should be thinking about is, what did I do and how and why did I do it? Okay. There are actually 6 items listed under this category, including testing, evaluation, and verification, particularly in the context of practicality, safety, and efficacy. Competency 2 focuses on the tools, specifically on the tools that are used to complete your work. There are 4 items listed here, and under these 4 items, you're asked to describe what you used and why. Did you consider any of the tool's limitations? How did you use it, and how did you verify the results? This category encourages deliberate consideration of aspects of engineering work that are often taken for granted because there may be only one tool currently available for that job. But it also empowers us to make sure we're using the right tool for the right job and the right reasons. One excellent reason for deliberate and focused attention is safety. And competency 3 allows a specific focus on public safety and interest. While the public has a special focus under this category, We encourage you to also share aspects of your work that impacted project team members, whether it was the client, contractors, other persons within your organization. As expected, under this category, we span the gamut from legislation and codes through assessments to risk mitigation and communication. So everything under safety is considered here under that umbrella. Obviously, it's hard to just create very distinct categories, so there's often some overlap. So you may find that one activity may allow several competencies to be demonstrated, as can be seen with the 7 items under competency 4. For example, safety management will include planning, resource allocation, and record keeping. So the principles of engineering management will be strongly represented there. Similarly, verbal and written communication is employed throughout the engineering project cycle. Doesn't matter if it's schematics, layouts, minutes, presentations, or reports. Communication skills under competency 5 is going to be extremely important. This competency also includes two-way communication. And we want to make sure that you do demonstrate that there is two-way communication because it's critical to ensure the integration of stakeholder input and the maintenance of good team relationships. Teamwork is in fact competency 6 with 4 items. And that spans information sharing through consensus building. That means teamwork is going to involve a lot of active communication and consideration of the input of colleagues and team members in all roles. And it can provide the impetus for continued development where you may get some sort of criticism or even suggestions for training or how to fill skills gap. And of course, continuing professional development is the last, but perhaps a very critical competency, since the only constant in life is change, right? We have new tools and technologies emerging all the time. And that typically means that we have new skills that we need to learn and master. Feedback from colleagues can help us to identify our skills gaps, and knowledge sharing can suggest avenues for keeping your expertise current and expanding it. And obviously, sessions like this and others organized by BAPE provide a lot of opportunities for us to get more development of our various knowledge and skill sets. Hopefully, you have a little bit of a better understanding of the guide and you know how to get it if you don't have it already. And again, the guide is not just for the applicant, it's also for the individual supporting the applicant. But the guide actually then kind of almost required a revised form, because the way in which the guide approaches the experience requirement increased the breadth of information. And it meant that it wasn't going to be easily accommodated in the format that we've had for quite some time. So the board decided to revise the application to align it a bit better with the guidelines. Of course, nothing is perfect and we often have to go through revisions, but we decided what we've developed so far, we think is good enough to make a start, and hopefully is going to be very, very helpful to individuals. Some of the key changes include proposer and secondary stamps, where before no stamp was explicitly required. We would like the applicant to include a photograph. We're asking that even as graduates, you continue developing yourself professionally. So we want to see what activities you've been a part of since graduation. Rather than having a table for your record of engineering experience, we're facilitating a long form record. And we've expanded the notes and provided a checklist so that you're able to actually go through your application and see whether or not you've fulfilled, you've included everything that you need to. It hopefully will soon be available on BAPE's website, but in the meantime, if you contact ERB, you'll be able to get the new form by email. If you're looking for the registration application, the old one is still there, and hopefully the new one will soon be there in the same location. But you can go to BAPE's website and go to engineering application under downloads. So let's get down to the crux of the matter, this new form. How do we document these, core competencies? So this is what the form looks like in terms of the record of engineering experience. And if you're familiar with the old one, it pretty much was a table. Now, some of the same information is recorded here, but it's kind of been turned on its head, where the documentation on the left side is at the top and on the right side is at the bottom. It's a little bit more massaging here and there. Okay, so the reason that we're focusing on this is really that the majority of the form is quite basic and remains functionally the same, even if it looks a bit different. You've got names and contact information, your degrees, your courses, memberships, and so on. But this actually is the area that we've noticed most persons seem to have some difficulty with doing. And so we thought that this was the head place where we wanted to get a little bit of focus. Okay. So we've created a fictional example. Any similarity to actual engineers alive or passed on is purely coincidental. Okay. So let's zoom into some to the key sections here. So to start with the easy top and bottom, you're going to want to include the name of the assignment. In this case, let's imagine that we are lighting up Bridgetown somehow, or doing a project perhaps with LED replacement or something like that. And well, it is best that, you have some indication of the location of the project. It's not strictly necessary, but that kind of detail can actually be helpful. We have the start and end dates and the duration. And then the applicant's employer, right? The employer will typically be the company that you're working with. And there's a supervisor that is going to be able to sign off for you. In this case, we haven't included a mentor because Mr. Guy Smiley is a registered engineer in Barbados. Now, the most important bit now is that statement of duties, responsibilities, and competencies. We recognize with the previous form, it was very difficult to work with the space given. And in this case, we still acknowledge that you may need more than one page to fully document your experience, your competencies on a particular project. Okay. Even in our example, it ended up being a bit much because we wanted to actually be able to read the approach to this. So we've actually truncated it to keep the text, somewhat readable. This particular style also uses what I'll call inline referencing. So from the first sentence, we have at project start, a coordinated team, technical meetings, and so on. And at the end, we have C5-2 and C5-3. Those are references to competency 5, which is communication. And then, as I told you, there are items under competency 5. So it's competency 5, item 2, and item 3, where these are referencing some aspect of what those competencies, those items actually say under those competencies. Doing the application in this way almost allows you to kind of have almost like a conversation with the board through your application. You're talking your way through the experiences that you have had during this process and period. Now, this is not the only way to do this. Okay, this is not the only way to do this, but please remember, it is the applicant's responsibility to provide evidence of their competency, meaning you have to tell us. You have to tell us, and you have to tell us when you say X, Y, Z, well, what does this demonstrate competency of? You need to be quite self-aware of what your processes are and how that demonstrates the competencies in the guide. Whether you do it in this online style or you have some other style, I don't think that members of the board are specifically, fussed to be strict about that. But this is just an example of a way that you can link a competency with an experience that you are documenting. Okay. Obviously, through these various paragraphs, you're noting that oftentimes there's more than one reference. And that's because, as I said before, you often are able to demonstrate more than one competency with a particular item of evidence, quote unquote. So in this, written conversation, you're describing what you're doing. You may lump several things together that are all a part of a particular task, and therefore you're going to reference more than one item. It is not absolutely necessary to exhaust all the competencies that in a particular section that you may actually be able to demonstrate. What's more important, because the application is going to be taken as a whole, is that you show strong evidence across the board over those 48 months, those 4 years of experience that you're documenting. You need to show strong evidence that you've actually had these experiences and that these experiences align with the competencies. Remember, someone else is also verifying for you. So it's not simply that, we're taking it totally for granted that you're telling the truth. There's an engineer that's backing you up, but you need to be very clear in what you are presenting, and you need to make sure that you link it to the guide. That's your responsibility. So you've sent in your application and you've been called to schedule an interview. Do not panic. It's not like you're being called to the principal's office. Okay? If you notice, the communication skills I referred to previously speak to two-way communication and verbal communication. And so if you notice that, you'll understand why the board is making an interview a routine part of the application process, because demonstrating that you have strong verbal communication and two-way communication skills is pretty challenging in a written format. Okay. Also, there's some information that may be easier to communicate verbally. You may find that, you end up writing a book about all of your experiences, and you really want to try to be succinct in your application. So if the board has additional questions about particular paragraphs or items, bullet points in our application, the interview is exactly the space in which those queries are likely to be resolved. I just want to highlight one aspect of the interview that is critical is meaning the duties, the activities the applicant actually did are of paramount importance. If, let's say, you went on a measurement campaign, you're going across the factory and you're taking a number of measurements, and you as a trainee, you checked and calibrated devices, you created and completed the data collection form, the application and the review interview should reflect that. We don't need to hear about the we, because we are not processing an application for the entire engineering team at your workplace. We're evaluating you, the applicant. So we really want to know what you have done. What's the experience that you have had? What are your competencies? Okay. Just remember, right? If the written application is lacking, you will likely be asked to resubmit. You wouldn't be invited to interview if it is, for example, that you have not, completed your documentation appropriately. You haven't included a lot of information about your degrees, or somehow you don't have proposers and secondaries. We're not going to accept it like that. You need to consider that the written application is the first and primary basis for consideration, and that other requirements are supplementary. But remember, the law states that you have to satisfy the board. And so that's the main basis on which applications are going to be considered. All right. Well, let's say your application was accepted. Very exciting. Your interview was outstanding. We were happy with it. What happens next? Okay. Now, by law, the which is the Engineers Registration Act that I spoke of before, and the Profession and Trade and Business Registration Act, which is Chapter 373, your name must be entered on the Register of Engineers, which is administered by the Registrar of the Supreme Court. The board does not administer the register. So there's a process for getting your name onto that register. Now, whether the application has been approved or not, you're actually going to get communication from the board indicating the outcome. So if it has been approved, you will receive 2 letters, the second of which is going to be addressed to the Registrar of the Supreme Court. That is your documentation to take there to indicate to them that you have the right to be registered or eligible, right? And therefore, you are now able to pay your fees, okay? Now, what's the fee? The yearly fee is $1,250. And that is prorated, let's say, in the second half of the year on a monthly basis. So let's say that you were approved, let's say on, I don't know, September's board meeting, and therefore you're going to be registered from October to December this year, you would pay a quarter of the fees, or $312.50. And this has been confirmed by the Registrar of the Supreme Court that they are doing this. Okay, now once you have gotten your fees paid, okay, so you presented a letter at the right window at the registrar's office in White Park Road, and you made your payment, got issued your certificate, right? Because there is a certificate that you have to be issued. And let's say you receive the certificate immediately. Sometimes you do get it immediately, sometimes not, regardless. After you receive your certificate, you need to bring that information, that certificate, back to the board. That way, the internal records can be updated, confirming that you did register, and also so that you can pay for your new stamp. Now, I don't have to hand my stamp. There is a stamp being issued now by the board. It is now going to be like the official format for the stamp. So new applicants and engineers who are already in practice really need to contact the ERB office to make sure that they get the updated stamp. So you're now a registered engineer. Kudos to you. Great. You still have things that you need to remember. You need to maintain your registration. Part of maintaining your registration is actually to pay the fee every year by January 31st. Okay. If you're late, there's a late fee. So it's really important that you do so, because the late fee is equivalent to an entire year's registration fee. If you have EasyPay Plus, luckily, if you have that online portal, you should be able to pay online and bring your receipt to the registrar's office to get your certificate for the year. Okay. There have been in the past some issues with online versus in person. Hopefully, it's all going to be smooth this coming January. My advice to you is print it out and take it if you're going to take that route. But beyond the issue of yearly payment, that second act, Chapter 373, also talks about what happens if you're not registered but conducting business that requires registration. What happens if you fail to maintain registration? So if you're conducting business as an engineer without being registered, you can be fined $500 up front, $50 a day for each day you continue to do that. And in the latter case, you are considered deregistered if you fail to maintain your registration. You're considered deregistered. So beyond that, if you continue to operate as an engineer, potentially you could be fined the same way as if you have not been registered in the first place. There's the potential for that. Now, is that actively being done? That's very difficult to say if that's ever going to be an active focus, because it's kind of hard to monitor everyone. But it is best, really, I think, at least, to try to maintain your registration. Because if you have had multiple years of failing to register, the Registrar of the Supreme Court has indicated that if you want to come into compliance, you would need to pay the registration and late fees for the intervening years. Now, this is supposed to be, as far as I understand, according to the same chapter 373. Seems to be in an interpretation. I don't know exactly how it didn't ring that way to me, but the registrar did confirm that this is the approach that they're taking. You have to pay up for all of those intervening fees. So if it is that you're going to be out of the country for a long span, so you're not working here, or you're not going to be performing engineering work, maybe your role has changed, you're no longer going to be signing and stamping, it might be worthwhile to be proactive and request a suspension of your registration until you either return or resume your engineering activities, because it really doesn't make sense to have to pay all of that money if you're not actually going to be using the registration. Okay, so the other aspect of maintaining registration, which we're hoping we're going to be able to incorporate in the short term rather than the long, is going to be the completion of continuing professional development activities. Now, BAPE would have started this already in terms of its members, its corporate members, but we're seeking to move to incorporating that into the re-registration process. And that's why we said, this is not just a presentation for those persons who want to become registered, but also to speak to changes in maintaining registration. We all appreciate that the world has moved towards continuing professional development across various professions and disciplines, because we know that that skills gap develop over time, right? And so the approach here is that the activities will be ones that meet the requirements outlined in BAPE's CPD guidelines. Okay. Obviously, given the guidelines, BAPE's events that have been designated as CPD events would automatically comply. Okay. But overall, the guidelines that BAPE has produced indicate the number of points and different categories that comply with those CPD guidelines. Okay. So engineers have to ensure their participation in these events is documented and that they accumulate enough points for the year. There's a little bit of leeway in terms of rolling over some points, but I really encourage you guys to go and look at those CPD guidelines for yourself. And what would happen then is, once the list of those persons meeting that threshold is provided to the ERB, similar to the registration process, you would have your compliance letters issued, and then you would submit that along with your payment to the registrar to get your certificate. If you don't know where those guidelines are, again, you find them at BAPE's website under downloads. Okay. Everything basically tends to be on BAPE's website for these things that we're discussing. So I really encourage you to take a good look around the website and find all the information that's relevant to you. So I hope that I've been able to provide a brief but broad outline of what the board is looking for, what the board is looking to do in terms of CPDs and so on. And now I open the floor for any questions.
Thank you very much, Felicia. Very comprehensive and well put together presentation. Lots of information shared there this evening. And I hope those of you who are members would have taken note specifically of the closing comments as it related to the registration process, the fines, and some advice that was offered, and of course, information as it relates to continuous professional development. Now we're going to move to our question and answer segment. We do have Engineering Fellow Tony Gibbs. Good evening, sir. I see your hand is up, so we're going to let you start the ball rolling, and then I will move to the questions that have been placed in the chat. Just a reminder, if you want to engage Felicia with some questions, please do raise your hand, and I can let you ask those questions directly. If you prefer to put the questions in the chat, then I can refer them to Felicia. So Engineer Gibbs, Felicia. Engineer
Yes,
Gibbs, you can answer your questions.
good evening, colleagues. In the early part of Felicia's excellent presentation, she stated what we should all know from reading the Registration Act, that the academic requirements for registration are the Bachelor of Science degree in engineering from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. And then she went on to say that the alternative is an accredited degree from another university. And she defined an accredited degree as being one which was accredited by the Washington Accord. I don't think the Washington Accord is actually mentioned in the Registration Act. And to impose a Washington Accord accreditation as an alternative to the current BSc Civil Engineering or any engineering degree from BSc Engineering degree from St. Augustine is a bit harsh, because as far as I'm aware, the BSc in engineering from any of the 4 departments of engineering at St. Augustine, they do not have accreditation from the Washington Accord. So has there been a change recently, Felicia?
Thanks for that question, Engineer Gibbs. In terms of a change, I have to admit that I had been told the Washington Accord was a benchmark when I, graduated from school. I don't really think that necessarily there is a change. However, there is a desire to have some consistency, and and obviously written into the law is that University of the West Indies degrees be acceptable. And can be extremely challenging, I think, for the board to be able to vet, specific programs. And therefore, one way is to effectively refer to international agreements that allow movement of engineers. Now, in order for you to be a signatory with the Washington Accord, right, your country basically has to sign on to it. And there is an administering organization, which is typically the accreditation council or whatever association is dealing with accreditation in that specific country. So it is not to say that a particular degree may not be a good engineering degree. However, the board itself, number one, it's not a massive board and resources are limited. So there's only so much that we can do to verify, and we do have a duty of responsibility to the public to ensure that those individuals that we are going to approve are meeting a standard. That's the current standard that board members have indicated to me that they're comfortable with at the moment. Of course, if there are any alternative standards that say you, Engineer Gibbs, may think it, should be applied, I'm sure that members of the board will be willing to listen and consider. But to my knowledge, and any of the other board members currently in the meeting can feel free to chime in here. The decision was taken because of some of the challenges we've experienced in seeking to validate programs which aren't necessarily accredited, even when the country is a signatory, because you can have a country that's a signatory and programs are still not accredited under the Washington Accord. That this is the way that we will have to operate, because again, we can't necessarily go into each engineering school and accredit it for ourselves.
Well, I have nothing against the Washington Accord.
Yeah, I know.
It's just that it is in fact a higher level of accreditation than the UWI first degree currently has. But I am told I think I was on the Engineers Registration Board at the time, that there is an accreditation council, a government official body in Barbados that has the authority to decide what degrees should be acceptable to the Engineers Registration Board. There must be somebody else at this meeting this evening who could confirm or deny or clarify what I've just said.
Okay, so we have had some seen documentation submitted by the Barbados Accreditation Council. And unfortunately, particularly if, let's say, the degree does not necessarily specifically include, let's say, engineering in it, but it is a degree that we might expect, you know, may have a significant amount of engineering content or be functionally engineering. Sometimes the documentation from the Accreditation Council may not speak directly to that. And so one of the things which I know that the board is seeking to do is we're seeking to go through a process where we engage in the various stakeholders in these processes, including the Accreditation Council, the Registrar of the Supreme Court, and seeking to clarify various issues that we are seeing and experiencing in the process, and to try to see how the bodies can actually work together to ensure the quality that is going to be required, while at the same time making sure that it is not, you know, a completely onerous process. So I remember the documentation that we did receive from the Accreditation Council didn't necessarily say that it was, you know, accredited for engineering, for example, the specific degree. So there can be some challenges with that, and therefore we're seeking to try to find ways to kind of unlock, if you would, that particular issue. Is that helpful in any way?
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome.
Thank you, Engineering Gibbs, for that question. The first question from the chat, Felicia, that I have for you is from Dominic Ellis. And he's asking, if I'm based overseas, must I find a supervisor who's based in Barbados to support my registration under BAP?
Okay, so the answer is not necessarily. Of course, if you're based overseas, part of the question would be, okay, you do want to come back to Barbados to work, or are you actually going to stay over there? Because, you know, oftentimes people do that for a while. But if you're documenting, wherever you're working, you should be documenting that experience. There are persons who move here, or persons who start elsewhere and then come to Barbados to work. And as long as the evidentiary requirements are being met, we will accept. Now, one of the things that you would need to do is to ensure that you have the documents that are signed and stamped, but also validated. Because what we also would note is that oftentimes some of those documents, they're coming from a ways away, often by email. And if it is that you have somebody that is stamping and sending something from overseas, a Justice of the Peace, a Notary Public, someone having the authority to certify official documents, should certify that this person and this person's stamp is, you know, this is a true reflection of the individual who has said that they're signing this document. Because if it is that it is a local person, we are given by the Registrar of the Supreme Court the list of persons who are registered and currently registered. Now, as a part of the form, we are also going to be asking you to provide, to collect information from those persons who are going to be certifying, so that if we're going to be able to verify that that person is actually registered. So once that information is provided, no, it does not have to be a local person.
Thanks, Felicia. Dominic Ellis, I hope that answers your question. If not, please do feel free to unmute if you want to follow up on the question further. Is there anything you want to add or ask? Continuing on to that, Dominic?
No, I think that's perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying.
And if you don't mind us asking, which domicile are you currently in?
In the UK currently.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're up quite late, and thank you for
I
joining.
know,
Great
yeah.
session.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
thanks for having me. Cheers.
Good. All right, so the next question we have is from Tajiri Griffith. Oh, that was a comment. Let me see. Okay, it's a question. So Tajiri is asking, must you also document the meeting minutes with your mentor?
I think that taking notes in meetings with your mentor will be useful to you. Whether you don't have to submit meeting minutes from your mentorship opportunities to the board, right? Because that is supposed to be, I guess you would say, a little bit less of a formal relationship. Simply because we recognize that different people are going to play different roles to each trainee, and the more exposure and experience that a trainee can get, learning vicariously from others, the stronger that person is likely to become as an engineer. So we're suggesting that you seek out mentors if persons are willing to mentor you, but understand that mentorship can't be forced on anyone, either the applicant or the mentor. And therefore, mentorship is more of a suggested role that people can take to assist in the development of the fraternity rather than something that is absolutely required. So again, it's less of a formal arrangement. Minutes are not necessarily going to be required. We're far more concerned with the direct work experiences that you are getting. Now, if it is that somehow your mentor is actually providing you with some sort of specific work experience, then that is something that you may want to document. But in that case, your mentor is actually now acting as a supervisor and not just as a mentor for that specific bit of experience. So I would say that what you're going to document is going to be more towards your experiences, again, your experiences. If what you want to do is to use that to show communication or something like that, I mean, you could to give a sample of your ability to write minutes if that's what you want to submit, but that's less of a formal relationship.
Thanks for that. All right, next question we have, let's see. This one is from Demar Panton. Does the start and end date include the design period, strictly actual construction or field work?
The design period is part of your engineering experience. So of course, the design period is a part of your engineering record. It should be a part of your engineering record. It is especially in the design period you're going to be able to, for example, demonstrate your use of certain software tools, whether it is computer-aided drafting or some sort of building modeling. You know, it's definitely a critical part of being becoming an engineer. So most certainly include that as a part of that time.
Great. All right, this one is from Shamari Cave. Oh, sorry. Demar, did you want to follow up with anything extra, or is that pretty clear for you? Demar, you're still there?
Hello.
Hi, did you want to follow up with anything, or was that reply?
No, I got the answer I was looking for, so I appreciate it.
Fantastic. And where are you? Are you a student or you're in practice, Demar?
I am in practice. I'm at the Barbados Water Authority.
Great, great. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
No
All right.
problem.
Next question up is Shamari Cave. Do I need a mentor to sign off on my engineering experience if my supervisor, if my supervisor is a registered engineer by the ERB?
If your supervisor is registered under the engineer's registration act, that person can sign for you, full stop. You don't need the mentor to sign. If you have a mentor that is willing to sign regardless, go ahead. There's nothing hurting it.
Shamari, is that reply answer your question? Anything you want to follow up with there?
No, that answer was fine for me. Thank you.
All right, and are you a student or are you also in practice?
In practice, I currently work at the Coastal Zone Management Unit.
Fantastic, great. Well, thanks for joining us this evening. All right, let's see if you got any more questions in here. All right, Akil Cox. If I have documented engineering experience, but my previous supervisor is unable to sign off, can a mentor during that time sign off instead?
That's a bit of a ticklish one. Why would they be unable to sign off? Let's see. Let me find the question.
Well,
In
it could be a
reference to a
situation, Felicia, that they're
non-engineering
working,
supervisor.
they may be working with a
Okay.
contracting firm and the supervisor may not necessarily be a registered engineer.
Yes. You're gonna need a registered engineer to sign off. So if your mentor has direct knowledge of it and has assisted you, perhaps give you guidance or whatever, or there is or well, really and truly, actually, let me rephrase what I'm gonna say here. One of the reasons for this session is that we want to reduce the incidences of this happening. We want to encourage those persons who are currently trainees and may be in a situation where there is their supervisor is not a registered engineer, to approach your supervisor, approach persons in management, and to go about trying to establish a relationship with a registered engineer who is going to be able to take responsibility for this work. Be proactive about it. And one of the reasons I say be proactive about it is sometimes you're lucky. Maybe you're working at a construction firm who does a lot of work, and therefore you've had exposure to plenty of different engineers through the course of your work. Perhaps you've had a lot of experiences with specific engineers because you maybe have been working on a project for a year or two, and they are witnessing your performance, and your outputs are coming to them and they're seeing how you do. Those persons may be very willing to sign off because they're directly experiencing that. However, what we really want is that persons be under the supervision of an engineer when they are actually accumulating this engineering experience. We understand the difficulties with doing this because there are multiple organizations, and I will acknowledge I've seen it in government entities where there may not be an engineer despite there being an engineering department. Very, very strange situation, but there you have it. But there needs to be a concerted effort across the board for companies, statutory boards, government and private sector alike to come into compliance with the requirements of the act, where you're not supposed to have persons working in engineering roles without being supervised by an engineer or without being registered themselves. It's really a ticklish situation. Technically, you are in violation of the law. And so, yes, while mentors may be uniquely placed to assist in this situation, we really want to encourage supervisors, employers, statutory bodies, whether we're talking about water authority, other entities, Barbados National Oil, which are government owned and have engineering work taking place. If you do not have supervising registered engineers over persons doing engineering work, you need to regularize that somehow, whether you're talking about individuals that you contract to be able to provide some of this assistance and supervisory capability, or hiring someone full-time. However you need to do it, we really want people to come into compliance with this. Multiple cases of individuals operating outside the confines of the law have been kind of referred to us, and we're making inquiries about them. And I know the board has in the past and will continue in the future, has actually had outreach, so sending letters to different organizations, even placing ads in a newspaper, reminding people that that's something they're not supposed to do. You really need engineers supervising engineering work.
Well, you're forcing me to put on my interviewer's hat here now.
Go
Felicia.
right ahead. Go right ahead, Vista. I know you're gonna ask a
Um,
question.
you have just made quite an intriguing and interesting statement, which would
Mm-hmm.
suggest to us that the ERB
Mm-hmm.
has some work to do,
Yes.
in particular as it refers to statutory entities in
Go
the
there.
country,
Don't 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 remind me.
where you have established posts of engineer and persons who are not registered acting within those posts. So it does mean that in addition to educating our members and our student members, it seems that you will have to have some outreach as well and education to some of these statutory entities to basically remind them that they're breaking the law that they're supposed to be enforcing.
Well, part of the challenge always comes with knowing who's breaking the law, right? So sometimes, sometimes what the board may end up doing is trying to compile a list of entities which are likely to be doing engineering work. Of course, we're not going to come out and say, accuse people and say, you're doing engineering work and I don't think you have a registered engineer. No, that's not the approach. Really and truly, it's more of a blanket, we're just reminding you that if you are doing engineering work, that work should be done under the supervision of a registered engineer as per the Engineers Registration Act. That's really the approach. But where instances are brought up, then it's more like we have to act. We have to insert ourselves and query things. There's really no once people are made aware, there should not be a reason why people can't find ways to come into compliance, right? Because I'm sure that BAPE would welcome individuals to communicate with BAPE, express their concerns, indicate that they're having challenges, getting compliance and so on. I don't think anyone wants to shut down a critical agency or shut down a business. That's really not what we're trying to do. All we're trying to do is really to secure and protect the public's interest. That's basically the responsibility of the board. We need to be the guard. They ask who guards the guards. Well, we're supposed to, y'all engineers are supposed to be those bastions of the public interest on the individual projects, and we are the ones who are supposed to make sure that the engineers are doing what they're supposed to do on the engineering side of things. So we have a serious responsibility, but we're trying to be proactive. We know it's a lot of work, to be honest, because to be able to figure out every single business that may be operating in this way, you don't know when people create a new business, Vincent, right? So oftentimes in a situation where maybe you see an ad or you see something happening, you're like, oh, okay, what's this? What's this company? But I think one thing that hopefully eventually everyone is going to be able to agree to is it's collectively our responsibility. So if you see something that looks pretty fishy, you see this company operating, it doesn't seem to have any engineers, it's doing all this engineering work, something doesn't make sense, then it may feel like, you're a little bit of a snitch, but consider what happens if the person didn't have the requisite experience and you have a fatal flaw in an item of civil construction or something like that. People's lives are at risk. That's our job. Our job is to protect people's lives when they're using infrastructure and equipment that we're building, that we're creating one way or another. So we have to take it very seriously.
So again, you're forcing me to ask you another question. There are well-established contracting firms in this country who promote themselves on being civil engineering contractors, but you will probably be at pains to find a registered engineer on their staff. But they are undertaking civils works designed by registered engineers, but in terms of having that on staff supervision element, that is a person who is registered, it just does not exist. You may have persons who have an engineering degree, but they're not registered. So is the ERB prepared to work with these companies to find a means and way of ensuring that graduates who go on to work for these companies, because realistically, in 166 square miles, it is not every engineering practice that's going to be able to absorb persons coming back to Barbados. So some persons will inevitably end up working for some similar type firms. So is the ERB then prepared to work with these companies to find ways to get the mentorship program set up so that where there is a deficit on the part of the company, that facilitation can still be found to ensure that these persons then are able to obtain the necessary competencies and have them signed off by registered persons?
Well, I'm not sure that our reach actually goes that far. What I will say is a majority of the members on the board are also members of BAPE. They were recommended by, basically sponsored by the executive committee of BAPE. And so I think that it's more of on a fraternity level, we need to try to fix this problem. The resources of the board are somewhat constrained in that it's a statutory body. So all of its funding comes from the government. And we know how the government is these days about funding different agencies. It can be very challenging to get all the funds you need to do everything. It's unlikely in the short term that we're going to be able to establish any program similar to that. And it would still require the cooperation of BAPE because it is the engineering body. It may not represent all engineers in Barbados, but I'm sure it has a significant proportion of the registered engineers being members. Many student members are, at least even looking at tonight's engagement, we've got 43 people on the call. These are quite a few people interested in this particular topic. So through the engagement that BAPE has been doing, it's been able to reach out to individuals across the engineering fraternity in Barbados, regardless of the role. And I think it may end up having to be a collaboration between the ERB more in a regulatory role and the BAPE in a more functional way to do this assistance, because until and unless there is significantly increased funding, there's not going to be a way to actually fund a mentorship program through the ERB. And again, it's a statutory board, so there are, I guess you would say, you kind of have to follow the financial rules. You can't just do any and everything, whereas BAPE is going to have far more flexibility in the way that it operates.
Thank you for that reply. Okay, so let's push ahead. We have some more questions in the chat before we wrap up tonight's session. Question from Justin Leslie. If a small period of my engineering experience was overseas, and at the time of my registration, that supervisor has moved on to another country and firm, and I cannot contact them, what should be done in that case? He was the only registered engineer at the firm at my time of employment.
Oh my, that's a very difficult one. Okay, I would say this. If it is that it's a very small, you said it's a small period, and you have well in excess of the experience requirement. So the requirement is 4 years. And maybe overall, let's say you accumulated, I don't know, 5. And this was maybe 6 months or something like that. If there are non-engineering supervisors that was a part of that process, I would suggest perhaps have them sign, documenting, because you also don't want to have gaps in your experience. So you would have them sign, indicate that they're non-engineering manager, and perhaps have them submit a document indicating why the engineering person is unable to sign on your behalf, because you'll be able to, in that case, you'd basically be covered with the rest of the engineering experience, but you can still have that specific experience documented there. We'll look at it regardless. It's just, right now I'm hopefully, I want to hone in on my point, because I experienced this too. Many engineers before have experienced this, where we did not document as we were going along. It is so hard sometimes to track down the people that you were working with. That is just a fact. Persons, sometimes they pass away, or in this case, they move. And so what we really want to try to do as of right now is to encourage everyone that's currently going through this progress. Please do this as you go along. Please don't wait to the end and wait to document for a couple of reasons, right? One is this issue. But the other thing is you can miss a lot that you did and fail to document it because you simply don't remember. It's been such a long time since you put pen to paper, and you want to make sure that you have robust documentation. There's so many things that happen during the course of a day that by the time you come to the end of a month, a year, you don't have all of those details written down. So even if what you're doing is you're not documenting stuff initially on the form, initially, I would advise that as you go through your process, as you put down your documentation, you finish off a project, let's say, write up that page, write up the experience page for that, and have someone sign off. And I think that's probably the best way to avoid these scenarios. But I would say, if possible, make sure you have enough in excess of those 48 months that little gap doesn't really matter much. And if there's a little bit of a gap still, I don't know, like a 3 month or something, that then it may not necessarily be I can't say that. It really needs to be the 48 months. I shouldn't speak of the term because the law says it needs to be 4 years. But it may just be that if it's such a short period, you can find a way in your current role to complete that documentation. I don't know. That's the best I can think of straight off the cuff for that specific scenario. It's a really tough situation to be in.
Yeah, what I want to add to what you're saying, Felicia, is that for those of us who work on site, I don't know if it obtains in a design office. Someone else will have to say, but you're usually required to write up a daily site diary. And it might not be a bad idea for you, the member who is in this registration process, to perhaps have a diary, whether it is a physical book, if that works for you, or a digital diary, where either if it is daily or weekly, you can write down what it is you're doing so that it doesn't become an onerous exercise to have to look back to figure out what you did when. If you're constantly spending that 5 minutes a day, or probably a 10-minute weekly doing a diary like that, then when you have to accumulate your work experience, have persons to sign off on it, because you'll be making continuous copious notes of who you're working with, what you've been doing, then recording those experiences become a bit easier. So I know journaling is probably one of those things that have gone out of vogue, but I would encourage you in this period of your professional development that perhaps it may be a good activity to adopt. So I just wanted to put that in. Justin, were we able to answer your question for you? Do you have any follow-up on your question? Justin Leslie? Is Justin still there?
Thanks, Vincent. My question was answered.
Okay, you will need any follow-up, or are you good there?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Fantastic. Okay. All right, just a second, guys. Right, next question coming at you, Felicia. This one is from David Combs. Hi, Felicia. Is it a requirement for your supervisor to be employed by your company, or can they be contacted in an example, for example, a consultant, someone in a consulting role who may have a relationship with your company?
Well, technically, if they're contracted in a consultant role, for the purpose of our process, the person is effectively an employee of the company. I mean, they're a contracted employee, but they're an employee nonetheless. So if it is that the person is supervising you, has direct knowledge of the work that you are doing within the company, then it doesn't matter. We're not concerned with the specifics of the person's contract with the company. We're more concerned with what's the role the individual has had with respect to your engineering experience. Obviously, someone who is employed by the company is more likely to have a better sense of who you are and your work ethic, and that person is often best placed to, for example, be your proposer or be your seconder. And that is also a person who really and truly may be able to help guide you and give you lots of different experiences. So it's almost expected that your supervisor is going to be a key part of this. But the supervisor, the specific contractual relationship between the supervisor and the company is not what we're looking for.
Okay, Felicia. Jared Chewett, I see your hand is raised. Just stand by. David, was that answer sufficient for your question, please? David, are you still in the chat? All right, I think they might have hopped off. So, Jared, can you unmute and ask your question?
Hi, good night, everyone. I'm also an engineer in training at the Barbados Water Authority. My question is, I would like to find out if the mentor could be a supervisor and also a referee. Is that possible?
Someone can take on multiple roles, yes. I think it was indicated earlier that your supervisor, the proposer, the seconder, they are expected to perhaps have been a supervisor of yours, because again, the person that is being a referee, a proposer, and a seconder, they're actually saying, I am certifying that the individual who is making this application is a good candidate for registration. And typically you're going to have that confidence over relatively long-term exposure to that person and oftentimes direct training under the individual. It does not mean that that person definitely has directly trained that person, but they've had sufficient exposure over various projects to be able to say with confidence, I know that this person is going to be a good engineer.
Jared, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I also want to ask a question. What role does volunteerism play if you're in a field where you're not an engineer per se, but you're in the engineering field with an engineering degree? Can you gain experience that could be used for the registration process?
That is such an interesting question. I'm not gonna say no. It's just I'm not sure how that would be organized. And the reason that I say that is oftentimes the type of experience that we're expecting you to accumulate, it tends to happen naturally in the course of doing the engineering work. To create these scenarios, you almost have to basically have a second job. Because even if you're saying that it's on a volunteer basis, meaning you're not getting paid for it, you still need to put in the work. So I'm never gonna tell you no. If you're willing to undertake unpaid labor to do this, then more power to you is what I'll say. But there is not a scenario where I can imagine that if you've really, truly, honestly accumulated experience that meets the requirements in an engineering field, like we don't check people's pay stubs. Let me just say it that way. We're not checking to see if you're actually employed doing this work. That's not our concern. It's not our concern that you've been literally paid to do this. Really and truly, if you somehow are able to accumulate the training, you're still going to be doing work. So while it says on the job training, if you just literally haven't been paid for it, but you're doing the work, I really can't imagine that we would say, no, you didn't get money for this, so it don't count. I can't imagine a scenario in which I would say that. So I would say, sure, you can go right ahead if you can find those opportunities and you have the time to do so.
Fantastic. Bruce Gopal, can you unmute for a minute? Hi, Bruce. Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm fine. What's up?
Bruce, you're one of our regional colleagues who is living and working in Barbados, and I think recently you would have completed your registration process. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Can you give us an indication, because this offers then a unique perspective of a regional engineer who's coming to live and work in Barbados, what that process was like for you, and any advice that you may want to offer persons here who may be working in Barbados, may have qualifications that are not Barbadian, but are working in an engineering capacity here. So we would really I think, benefit from your unique perspective on this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Well, first of all, it was a challenge and it did take me some time to be registered. But as with everything in engineering and life, you have to keep at it, make small changes and you should get there. But there were a few options open and available to me to be registered. And one of those would be if you have experience outside of Barbados under an external registered engineer, they can also be your nominator / seconder, and they can, I believe there's an option for them to sign an affidavit or something along those lines to show your experience in engineering. What I would suggest though is you use the guidelines. The guidelines were very, very specific and very helpful. And using the guidelines, I would say that would enable you to specifically identify what you need to highlight for your registration as an engineer. There would be some networking involved, but I would highly suggest you get acquainted with a local engineer in Barbados for advice and maybe get them familiar with the works you have done and that you are working on.
So Bruce, how important coming through the process was being it, or would you recommend is important in terms of documenting your work experience and so on? How important a process is that?
It's very important. What was helpful to me was that I have accreditation and experience in project management, and proper project management comes with documentation of your projects. So that would have helped to identify, for you to identify you meeting these specific standards in the registration guidelines, such as your safety, the engineering management practices, etc. I would also suggest you update your resume or your CV frequently, maybe once a year, and update it with some of the projects you did, as well as keep updating your portfolio, your job description as well. That will also help you document your role and your history as an engineer.
All right, Felicia, there's any question or interaction you will have with Bruce before we close? I just thought that having Bruce comment on what we were talking about tonight would also be useful. So is there anything you want to add or ask? Sorry, Felicia, not hearing you if you're speaking.
Sorry about that. I muted my headset. I want to give a brief comment about something that you said, but that plays into what Bruce just expressed. Particularly if you are challenged to sometimes find the time to document things in writing. Just remember that technology can be our friend in this. You're going on site. There are going to be other individuals on site. You can do video records, video journaling. You can take photographs or have photographs taken of you doing what you're doing. And one of the benefits, obviously, of doing so is it's automatically time and date stamped so that you are able to accumulate your information perhaps in ways that are even better than a journal, because as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You may be able to pick up details through your recording of your actually, doing something that you may not have thought to do after the fact when you're sitting and writing in a journal or in a site book when you're actually on site, right? And I'm suggesting this in part because I don't know how many of you interact with individuals going through vocational training. Okay, but this is functionally a vocational process. And all that vocational training tends to imply is that you're meeting a requirement or you're getting a certification while on the job. And as a part of the formal TVET process, when people are documenting their competencies, the similar language is being used there. You're either competent or you're not yet competent. But one of the ways in which they develop their portfolios is that they will have pictures taken, they may even do recordings, and so on. And in this way, they're actually able to have a rather robust journal by the end of things. So just want to remind you, technology is your friend. We're all walking around with miniature computers, combination computer, video recording equipment, audio equipment in our pockets. Let's make use of that.
Thanks for that. Okay, Bruce, thanks for sharing with us. I really appreciate that. Jared, your hand is up. You had another question?
No, sorry, no, I don't have another question.
Just wanted to be
Let me
sure.
take it now.
Okay, so Felicia, some closing comments before we break for tonight?
I more want to thank everybody for coming out. This has been a really great response. It's exactly the kind of response that the board was hoping for. And again, really encouraging you, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to contact the board. We often share with the with BAPE at Christie Building, the Garrison, which is right across the road from the Barbados Latent Power Company. And you can always reach us at erb@caribsurf.com. You can also now follow us on Instagram. We recognize that, you know, even though it's a statutory board, we probably need to kind of move a little bit with the times. And so not only have we modernized the logo, we've also sought to start using social media to get more information out there to try to sensitize everyone as to what they need to be doing and to what the board is doing. And we're going to hopefully be having a lot more content on there soon. So if you're on IG, go right ahead and follow us. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Felicia, for your very comprehensive presentation this evening. Thanks also to the members of the Engineers Registration Board who joined us tonight, and members of the Barbados Association of Professional Engineers, executive, and just general members who are also here to support. And for more importantly, you younger members and persons who are looking and seeking to be registered to join tonight to really find out what is required. So before we close, I just want to remind everyone of some events coming up. And there's an additional event which I neglected to mention earlier, which I will shortly. So our events that are coming up on the 20th of October, 9 a.m. at the retention pond at Layers, and this is out by C.O. Williams. We will be having a tour of the pond that is there, and that pond was constructed for harvesting rainwater for irrigation. That tour is going to be led by engineering fellow Andrew Hutchinson. We're asking you to park in the C.O. Williams car park, make your way safely across the road, and assemble for the tour, which will start at 9 a.m. So you'll see us out there on Saturday morning. So students and members alike and persons who are generally curious or interested, this is a CPD event. We do invite you to join us on the day. In addition, we have coming up on the 4th of November, we have coming up between the 1st to 3rd of November, the Caribbean Energies and Investment Summit, which is being hosted at the Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Center. And this is quite a big summit. We have persons from across the region of Latin America who will be coming to Barbados to discuss Caribbean Energies investment. On the opening day, we'll be having the usual welcome, including regional keynote delivery by Dr. Carla Barnett, a feature address by Professor Avinash Prasad. We'll have a ministerial keynote, which is going to be delivered by Senator the Honorable Lisa Cummins. There's going to be a ministerial roundtable, which speaks about building the Caribbean on sustainable collaborative growth. And that is going to have such persons as Honorable Lisa Cummins, Honorable Congress Maynard, who's the Minister of Public Infrastructure from St. Kitts, Honorable Walter Ruban from Bermuda, the Honorable Dr. Samuel Joseph from Montserrat, His Excellency Stuart Young coming. This is from the Office of the Prime Minister of the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. So this is quite a high-level summit where we're going to be having several persons involved. I do believe there's also the Honorable Prime Minister will be making a presentation in that summit. There'll be a roundtable, which would involve Engineer Omar Alahar, our President, Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Brown, Dr. Renata Clark, Lorraine Sobers, and others. So for those of you who are interested, you can go onto the BAPE website and you will see the flyer there. The APE are one of the persons who are partnering in this event. So for those of you who do have an interest in this type of activity, we will ask you to go on and discover a bit more about it. And this forms part of CARICOM's Energy Month for 2023. After that, on the 4th, which is the Saturday of November, BAP will be having its Students Interaction Session. This is the session, unfortunately, that had to be canceled on Saturday because of the inclement weather. We will be having that session on the 4th of November, where we'll be speaking to perhaps a slightly younger audience than those who are here, giving them information on what is required to become an engineer, what you should consider when you're going to be applying to university, your experience, your university experience, having persons probably to share a bit on that. And so we want to encourage students who are 5th, 6th form, community college, Samuel Jackman Prescott of the Institute of Technology, and university students to come out and avail yourself of the information that will be available on that day. It's going to be Saturday, the 4th of November. Starts at 3 p.m. is being held at the Barbados Public Workers Cooperative Credit Union Belmont Road Complex in the Harcourt Lewis Training Room. Again, we will be putting out a flyer, a revised flyer for that on our website and through the regular platforms that we use. This is a partnered event with the Barbados Public Workers Cooperative Credit Union, and they will also have persons there who will be speaking about how one can obtain a loan for academic study, and also information about their thrift club. So if you have younger members in your family or in your circle who you think could benefit from this event, or if you are a member and you would like to join us on the afternoon to be able to engage and share with the persons afterwards, we welcome you and we would encourage you to come out as well. So that is 2 events so far. The next event I want to bring to your attention will be our November webinar, which is being hosted on the 14th of November at 6 p.m. You will see the registration link will go out for that in the next week. And that webinar, the topic of that webinar is business opportunities for professionals in the built environment in Panama and Latin America. That's being delivered by His Excellency Ian Walcott, who is the Barbados's ambassador to Panama and Central America. And Ambassador Walcott will be sharing with us those possibilities for Barbadian engineering firms who may be seeking to spread their wings, but also perhaps to give an insight to students who may be on the cusp of graduating and will be looking for job opportunities. Perhaps there may be that opportunity to engage the ambassador to find out what opportunities may exist within Panama and Latin America on that occasion. And then the final announcement I want to make tonight is so we have the AGM, which will be coming up on the 23rd of November. Sorry, is that Is that correct? Yes, the 23rd of November is our AGM. So we'd ask that you keep an eye out on our regular platforms for information pertaining to the AGM. And we want to encourage our members to come out in terms of log on, and let us make this a successful AGM. Let's get a full quorum in and ready to discuss the matters of the association. You will hear the reports of what the various subcommittees have been doing throughout the year, what your association have been doing for you. So we want to encourage you to come out and obviously to support the election process that will be ongoing. And finally, our annual BAPE dinner and awards ceremony that is slated for the 2nd of December, 7 p.m. at the spanking new Wyndham Hotel, Sam Lord's Castle in St. Philip. This is the event not to be missed. It's going to be a phenomenal venue based on what I've been told. There was an event held just this last weekend at the same venue, and I'm told that it went off very well and persons were very impressed. So I really want to encourage you members to book this date, save the date in your calendar, and you will be getting some more information pertaining to the dinner. Perhaps you may want to call to reserve tickets and start making payments towards your ticket from early. This is obviously a big event for us as an association, where we get to recognize our fellow members for the sterling work that they would have done over the either the time of their careers, in terms of those who will be elevated to the status of fellow, or any recognition of the engineering project of the year. So we get to celebrate our members on that particular night, and we would ask that you come out and support this event. Also, if your company is interested in partnering with us to be a sponsor for the event, we would ask that you reach out to Stacy in the office or to Engineer Joan, and we would be more than happy to facilitate you with some information that will permit you to join us as a partner for this event. So I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. We did have a very good attendance, and I want to encourage you, please do avail yourself of the other events, as I would have mentioned, which are of CPD in nature, to take advantage of that, to make sure you get your full accumulation of CPD points as we come into the close of 2023. So thank you all for joining us. This event has been recorded, so if it is that you know someone who could benefit from this information, we will endeavor to have it up on our website within the next week or so. Please do direct them to the BAPE website, where they could watch this event and benefit from what was presented, but also from the questions that was asked, which drill down a little bit more into some of the content that we spoke about tonight. So without further ado, I want to wish you all a fantastic week, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I bid you a good night.
Good night.